This is Salty Believer Unscripted, a production of SaltyBeliever.com.
This is Salty Believer Unscripted. With me is Jared Jenkins. I'm Brian Catherman, and we're going to get into a series next time that I'm excited about. But for now, we've been walking through some aspects of culture, and we have even been talking about the gospel in our last series on how the gospel impacts a number of things. We probably could have put this discussion in that gospel series on how does the gospel speak into this.
Yes.
But we thought it'd be helpful to actually take it out of the framework of that series so we can talk a little broader.
That's right.
And
also let somebody a little more informed speak to it.
Yes. And so what we're talking about is this cultural reality of the sexual revolution. We'll call it that there's an excitement, that there's a movement towards anything goes in sexuality.
Yep.
And then in light of that, we have to ask ourselves, what do we do when someone says these kinds of words, like I'm a gay Christian? Mm-hmm. Or what do we do when a homosexual or a same-sex married couple comes into our church and one gets saved and one doesn't? Or what do we do about attraction? Or what do we? These are huge questions for the church.
Huge questions.
And we're not
hard questions.
Difficult. I think this is the challenging season for the church. This and probably suicide. These are the things that the church really needs to grapple with and wrestle with and not make light of and not be flippant about it and not just draw hard lines here and then not have conversations about it. So, Jared, you've been reading quite a few books on the topic, counseling with people on the topic, walking through this. And we've had some of the same issues even at Redeeming Life Church. How do we walk through this? We've seen people come to Christ and walk through this in lifestyle changes. We've seen people be very angry and upset with us because we want to pray for them or whatever. In different parts of our community, and it's a challenge. And so I think it'd be very helpful to talk about some of these resources, these books that you're finding, especially the one you have in your hand.
Yeah.
Let me see that really quick. I don't want to lose your page.
Oops. No, I'm ready.
So kind of the catalyst for this particular podcast and what we're going to be talking about is this new book called A Change of Affection, A Gay Man's Incredible Story of Redemption. It's by Becket Cook. And then there's a foreword in here by Francis Chan. If you've ever heard of him, he wrote the foreword. And then what I was catching my attention on this too is like J.P. Moreland and D.A. Carson have given endorsements to this book. And then a few others. I'm trying to think of who would be really notable that you'd recognize. But so this is not just some guy's self-published obscure thing in the corner. This is actually a solid conversation. There are a few other resources that have been really helpful in this regard too. But Jared, I want to chat with you about this. Why this book has been helpful for you. But before we do that, here's your, I think you got your finger on that page. Before we do that, I do want to share one thing. Because I think it's helpful for the both the heterosexual community and the homosexual community to have one solid realization. And I've had this conversation, I remember a brother in Christ who came out of a homosexual lifestyle at our church, and we watched him be baptized and watching him walk through this struggle. Remember this conversation really being impactful for he and I, because he had just stressed, hey, early on in his walk, this is a temptation I have, and this is a struggle I have, and I'm made this way, and how can I push away from this temptation? How can I push away from this struggle? And he would say, you don't understand.
Yeah.
You know, you're married, and you get to be married, and you get to have all this. To which I pressed back and said, I have a temptation and a struggle, and I was made this way.
Yeah.
I would like to have sex with women who aren't my wife.
That's right.
Right? And I would like to look at women inappropriately. Yeah. And I would like to walk it. So I would just like to say, let's frame this in that humility.
Yeah.
That we all struggle with sexual sin in some way or another. And we all need the gospel in one way or another. So I think it's really healthy and helpful to go, hey, that porn addiction that Brother Bob and the church is dealing with is equally as challenging on many levels as this homosexual temptation.
Yes.
Right? They both need the gospel. They're both dead-end roads. They're both sin. They're both sex. So I think I'm not minimizing either one of these or making one worse than the other. I'm just saying the reality of our sinful temptation is the reality of the world. And if more we get into it, the worse it gets, the harder it gets. Whether society approves or not is not the factor.
Yeah,
it's whether God approves or not. So,
and several of the books that I have read, and this one does this as well. But what you see when you read them is they make the point subtly, but when you're reading them as a whole, you can see that when the thought process and the way they're applying the gospel to this particular issue of homosexuality or
same-sex attraction or other sexual sin
is the same process you would apply to any other sin.
That's why it could have fit in our other series.
Yes, exactly.
And that's that's how the conversation needs to apply. But
exactly.
I do not think it's healthy in walking with this other brother, a few other people. I do not think it's healthy when we quickly go, well, one sin is the same of all the sins, and that when we minimize any of these issues, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
Well, we all have problems, and we don't want to compare one sexual sin in comparison to a white lie, a little small lie.
Right.
We want to say the magnitude of sin is serious, but the magnitude of the gospel is even better.
That's right.
More serious. And so that's what we want to do.
And that's really, so this story of Becket Cook, the title of the book is A Change of Affection, and that is his leading line, is that he found something better in the gospel than what he was gaining out of his homosexual lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. That what God showed him in the gospel was better, and it changed his affections for what he wants to follow.
Okay, so let's jump into this. I also didn't list the publisher. Who's the publisher of this book?
This is published by Thomas Nelson.
Okay, cool. So and it came out in 2019, right?
It came out, just recently.
Okay, cool. And I think you originally looked at it because he got saved through the Bible study in public.
Yeah, so it's a really fascinating story, and that's one of the things I like about this book is that it shows Christians being Christians, and I like that about it. So, basic story of his salvation is he was a gay man living like this for many, many years. Had everything in the world you could ever want. Was a set designer in Hollywood. I mean, he was living the life that we think these guys should live.
He wrote a Desiring God article, not a Desiring God,
Gospel Coalition.
Gospel Coalition article. So you can kind of get some of that background.
Google him. There's also a video going around on Venmo or YouTube where he does an interview of Eric Metaxas as well. That's super good.
Same kind of thing. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I just so if you're hearing this and go, that's interesting, you can find that too.
So he's living the cultural ideal, right? That we would say homosexual guys, this would be the ultimate picture of lifestyle for them. Mm-hmm. So he's at his favorite coffee shop on a Saturday morning with his boyfriend, and they're drinking coffee, doing their thing, and they notice a group of Christians across the room doing a Bible study in this downtown LA coffee shop.
Paper Bibles open.
Because
this was before the phone app Bibles.
That's right.
But still helpful.
And so they go through this discussion between the two of them that they say they want to go over there and talk to those guys, half out of interest, half to antagonize them. And so they go and they engage them, and the Christians were Christians, and they shared the gospel with them, and they, he asked them about the homosexual thing, and they didn't back down on what the Bible said.
But also, like in the article that he wrote, that they also didn't act like they had all the answers so perfectly. They said, yeah, it's hard and it's complicated. Like they kind of talked through it. So it was really a genuine and honest kind of conversation.
Yeah, so they ended up talking for a long time until this group had to go. And then before they left, they invited Becket to church. And he said that was kind of a shock to the system. And so he goes through how he wrestled with this kind of day in and day out for a while. And then he ends up going to church. And through the preaching of the word, he talks about how the Spirit of God just ministered to him, opened his eyes, and he gets saved the first Sunday he goes.
At church. Which is really important to remember, that the gathering of the church is the people gathered together in a building we call a church.
Yeah.
But all of us should be hearing the preaching of the word and seeing the gospel every time.
Yeah.
So that same thing should be happening even if we're saved, right?
Yeah.
So that's powerful.
Yeah, and so...
good argument for why you should try to make church a high priority and go every week rather than...
That's right.
For the gathering, right?
Yeah, and he does that throughout. I mean, some of his lots of his early discipleship, he's just devouring sermons online because that's where he's learning. That's where God is speaking to him.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he begins the process of becoming. He became a Christian that day, but just kind of starting to live,
putting on the new clothes, putting on Christ,
right? Yeah. And he had quite a profound change. But this book is now 10 years down the line from him becoming a Christian, and so it goes through a lot of different things. One thing I'd like to point, there's a couple things in the book I'd like to point out that I think this book is really helpful for. One is that he refutes the idea of somebody calling themselves a gay Christian.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about this. So this has been kind of a sometimes people mean that like I can live an openly gay lifestyle and still God accepts me. We would say that we think the Bible speaks against that. However, there's been a mediating position, and guys like Wesley Hill, I have another book I really like. Wesley Hill, who wrote Washed and Waiting, is another book on, and he struggles with same-sex attraction, and he calls himself a gay Christian, but he means a Christian that struggles with homosexuality, though he still agrees with what the Bible says that it's wrong.
So I found this is really helpful in discussing race, gender issues, when we're trying to figure out if it's politically correct to say or not, and how we feel about it. It's really helpful to flip the script. So let's say you're talking about an issue about something we'd say towards women. Okay, now let's flip the script and say it towards men and see if it sounds okay.
Right.
And if it doesn't, maybe there's a problem. Let's deal with race. Can you say that? Can we? So let's flip the script here. Yeah. So let's take this is a gay issue. Let's take a heterosexual issue.
Or if you said I'm a racist Christian.
Right. I struggle with racism, but I'm a racist Christian. We wouldn't say that. I'm an adulterous Christian.
Yeah.
I'm a thieving Christian. Right.
Yeah.
Like when you put any other temptation that we wrestle with, I'm a lying Christian. Yeah. I'm a hateful, vengeful Christian. Like it doesn't fit.
It doesn't fit.
And so it's hard to say that one that way.
Because then Christian, and even in the language, Christian is then modifying the word that goes previous. So I'm gay, but I'm also a Christian, instead of I'm a Christian and I also have these issues, right?
I'm a Christian and I struggle with sin in this way.
Yeah. So, like I said, Wesley Hill, the book Washed and Waiting, I do recommend this book, but he does take that line. That's my one big criticism of this book. But in Washed and Waiting, he has a lot of helpful things on how the church can deal with people. And just a lot of good insight into the mentality of people wrestling with this.
I'd like to add something to what you just said. How the church can deal with people does not mean how the staff or the pastor or the elders deal with people. How the church is all the people.
So just to mention a few, like Wesley Hill talks about how these people, that sounds bad too. People wrestling with homosexuality or same-sex attractions are lonely people. Mm-hmm. And one of the best things you can do to them in the church is befriend them, bring them into your circle of friends, make sure that they are included in things.
As the church.
It's
not the staff's job, it's the church's job.
As the church. And he does a great job showing that. But again, my criticism is that he calls himself a gay Christian. Now, in Beckett's book, he thoroughly blows that idea to smithereens.
I don't want to be identified with my temptation.
That's right. And he still is tempted by this, right? He never says that, hey, now I'm straight. He says, no, I struggle with this deeply, but I am a Christian first and foremost.
It's like someone who comes out of alcoholism.
Yeah.
And it might be, for them, they never go back into a bar ever again. Mm-hmm. They never have the liberty or freedom to ever drink or be around alcohol.
Right.
But because they might struggle with that the rest of their lives. And we hear that and go, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of similar, right? He might be in that kind of a camp where I can't come around this because it is his sin temptation.
That's right.
It's the thorn in his flesh that Christ is continually humbling him, bringing him back to him.
Yeah. But he says, I have been changed and made new. I am a Christian, right? Mm-hmm. And I will live as one, even though I struggle with these things. I also think, so, I was talking about Christian things. We see in this book, we see Christians doing Bible study, doing evangelism. We see the preaching of the Word having its impact that it should. And then we see him after he's a Christian. Man, this dude is an evangelist.
Which is awesome.
He's sharing with guys all over the place, right? And much to not in friendly circumstances, which I think is a really good example of, again, somebody that's had a change of affection towards Christ.
We've said this in past podcasts years ago. Often, God saves you with other people in mind too.
Yes.
Like there's just a bigger picture of all this.
I also think this book does a really good job. He's very introspective at one point, and he goes back and he thinks through, how did I get here? Right.
Which would be helpful to see.
I thought this was super helpful. So he points to several things that I just want to point out. One is he got exposed to pornography when he was young. Secondly, he said there was an abuse situation that's pretty graphic and happened to him when he was young. And he even says, I think I could have overcome these things had I not had this third piece. Is that he began to fall into cahoots with friends that were struggling with the same thing, and kind of kept him chained to this all through his adolescence.
It becomes an echo chamber of the same problems.
Exactly. Yeah, and then
which is why you need to be in a church community that knows how to preach the gospel to you.
Yes.
Because if you get yourself in that echo chamber, like we only think the gospel's for lost people, but like we talked about in the whole last series, no, you need someone going, that's not, here's where there's redemption, here's where there's truth. Right. He sounds like he didn't have that at all.
Yeah, he didn't have that at all. In fact, and then Tina pointed this out to me, one of our women's leaders here at Risen Life.
She's been on the podcast years ago.
Yep. She pointed out, also he points out that he had problems with his dad and with his mom, some relationship problems there. But I will say,
dead end roads, other problems led him into different brokenness in the same sphere of brokenness.
That's right. But he never blames it on anybody. He says, this was always my thing. These are the things that helped me get there. Though I think I could have overcome them with the right thinking, right? And it helped me.
I don't know if he said it this way, but Christ could have overcome them.
Yes,
with the right
that's
thinking,
what he's. That's what he's getting at.
With these pieces, there is hope, and
that's what he's saying. I could have overcome my porn addiction. I could have overcome the abuse that had happened to me had I had the right speaking in my life. But I had all these friends that were speaking lies, right? Yeah. Which spoke to me. Now, this is a side point as a parent, because just how important it is for us as parents to shepherd and speak truth into our kids' lives and to help protect them from some of these things, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, as best you can, right?
Right.
Try to protect them from the porn things, though when they do experience it, speak into their life, right?
With the gospel.
With the gospel.
Our kids need that. I mean, I think
this is, as we've said, this is a dog that will bite your children. It's just a matter of when and how do we
and
speak
what do they
into
do?
it.
Yeah, sorry, I mean, you got me all fired up.
Yeah,
the gospel.
Same thing with the abuse. You know, I pray every day that my kids don't get abused, but it's a possibility, right? And so knowing, again, being ready to speak the gospel into those situations so that you don't go down the right path. And then with their friends, you know, not letting, best you can. You can't always dictate.
When they go off to college, you can't control people's friends.
But being a voice of truth in the midst of whatever echo chamber they may be in.
I have some Christian friends here in the Valley, good friends of ours, and I was always impressed how both he and she had godly parents, and how those godly parents had continued value and input into their lives because they would always point them back to the Bible.
Yeah.
They would always point them back to Jesus rather than, well, here's some financial advice. They would ask them, hey, how do you see in any of these issues? I think, wow, and this couple has done well. Now, they have a lot of challenges. They have a child with a major illness. They have a lot of struggle. But because they had that foundation, it's amazing to watch that.
Yeah.
And so I think, man, I want my kids to be able to, because I'm showing them the gospel, I'm showing them where the true advice is, true power is, true healing is.
That's right.
I'm not the one saying, come to me for the answers.
No.
So when they're getting around their friends are like, well, my parents are going to point me to Jesus, and they go back to their parents every time.
Right.
And then his father passed away some time ago, and that's kind of been a void, but he's learned, and so now he has this other, I know how to go back to the source my dad gave me.
Yeah.
It's really powerful.
So one final section in his book, he's got a chapter called Just the FAQs, and he does it kind of exactly what we've been doing in our podcast. He takes popular questions that people say from living in homosexuality or struggling with same-sex attraction, and then he applies gospel answers to them with scripture, which I just love.
Here it is. Well, it's a lot of pages. That's
let me just give you a few of the questions. One would be, isn't it unfair that you have to be alone for the rest of your life? And right? Then applies gospel answer and says, I'm not alone. Jesus is with me. I have a faith family. And they're way better than anything I ever experienced before, right? But aren't you born gay, right?
And then here we go.
I'm going to leave some of these for the reader that then go find out. Didn't God create you that way, right? Doesn't God want you to be happy? But aren't we supposed to follow our hearts and be true to ourselves?
But if you apply the gospel answers to a lot of these, it applies to tons of stuff.
Right.
Tons of stuff.
Absolutely. Can you be gay and a Christian? Are you straight now?
Yeah,
right. So I leave those as a little teaser for you.
Helpful.
I think they're super helpful.
Let me see the book really quick. So the book is called "A Change of Affection: A Gay Man's Incredible Story of Redemption" by Becket Cook, and it is published by Thomas Nelson. Came out in 2019, especially if you're listening to this sometime long after we've recorded it.
Yeah.
I would encourage you, if you're interested in this, if this is a topic that you're wrestling with or you want to help someone else, you want to see how the gospel applies, sounds like this is the kind of book you ought to go pick up.
Absolutely.
It's on my wish list. I will be picking it up when I get to it on the list of reading, but good stuff.
And me and Brian in our we're going to see if we can get Becket Cook on one day. So Becket, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the podcast.
Yes.
I'd be super surprised if you're listening, but if you are,
or if you
we'd
know
love to have you on.
somebody, reach out to them.
If you know him, reach out to him. Say, hey, there's these two dorks in Salt Lake City. They'd love to talk to you.
That's unscripted and easy. We just need 20 minutes of your time.
That's right. We just need 20 minutes of your time, and we liked your book. So
yeah, that's great.
So yeah, I'll just say one other thing. So this right now is probably my favorite go-to resource on the subject. I do really like this Wesley Hill book that I have here too, Washed and Waiting. I think it also sets good theological standards for thinking about same-sex attraction.
That's a Zondervan one.
It's a Zondervan book, and it also has really good ideas for how the church can help people with this. But I do, with the caveat, I do disagree with calling himself a gay Christian. And then one other book I really liked, and this guy endorsed Becket Cook's book, is one by Sam Alberry. He's a pastor in the UK, and he wrote a book called "Is God Anti-Gay?"
Which is a very helpful book.
It's a very helpful book. So those would be my 3 go-to resources.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jared. I hope this has been helpful. We appreciate you coming along on the journey. We're jumping into another series next week, so get subscribed if you haven't subscribed. If you listen to this and you like it, we just encourage you to go out and find, wherever you listen to podcasts, write a review for us.
Yeah.
Let others know, hey, this is helpful, whatever it is, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. If you're wanting to find us, I'm at SaltyBeliever.com. There's a communication form you can use. Jared is at EntrustedWithTheGospel.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
Thanks for listening. For more information, please visit www.SaltyBeliever.com.